Anyway, morning everybody. I hope you can now hear me all right. Just a little bit about myself. If you have not met me before, I've got an interest in basically behavioural change and how to alter behaviour. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to apply one of the behavioural change models, one of the most recent models, to this idea of how we can promote cycling more effectively. So I'm going to share my screen now with yourselves. And you should now have that. Can you just confirm, Matt, that that's showing? Yeah, brilliant.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I've got it.
Yeah, super. So I've called it if you build it, will they come? I'll explain where that title came from in a moment or two. This is a picture I took just a couple of days ago, actually, in Doncaster, and this is one of the a newly implemented cycle path. Very nice tree-lined avenue here down the centre of Doncaster, and which is where I live. And a little bit further on, you've got the racecourse, so it leads you to the racecourse. Just round the corner, you have a fairly major college, which is belongs to Doncaster Deaf Trust, that has a large nursery in there. It has a school for the deaf, and it also has a further education college for people with communication difficulties. And my wife happens to work there, so I know this quite well. And I've driven up and down this road many times, and what's really struck me is, well, there's something really missing here. And I'll just give you a second or two to review those pictures, and I'm pretty sure you'll almost instantly spot what's missing. And what is missing are cyclists. Every time I've driven up and down that road, I've rarely, if ever, seen cyclists using that path. The other thing I'd just like to flag, and this is a little bit more of a personal issue with me, is this is a footpath here on the right. If you have children now walking down this footpath, where do you position your kids safely? For me, this path should be on this side, on the grass, and then the kids can go this side of you, because at the moment, and my wife walks down here with people with communication difficulties, and this causes her a lot of issues around the road and the cycle path. So now the pedestrian is trapped in the middle. But that's an aside. Okay, that's just me having a personal dig about this particular plan. Nothing personal to Doncaster. The key thing for today, though, is it's not really being used. It's almost a perfect path. It's got a lovely green line down it, nice tree line. It takes you off quite a major road. It connects Doncaster town centre with the racecourse and a lot of amenities up here. And yet, and further on, actually, there's a really big leisure centre up here, and yet it's hardly ever used. And thinking about this, what always sprung to mind was a film called Field of Dreams, which was done in the 80s. Some of you may remember it, you may not. Kevin Costner was a star. And basically, the idea was, if you build it, they will come. And what he was building was, he was building a baseball ground in his farm. The big issue there was all about, if you built this, would people come and play baseball there? And the short answer is, yes, they did. They did turn up and play baseball, but they were ghosts. They weren't real people. Sorry, there's a bit of background noise suddenly just started up in a garden near me, so apologies for that. I might have to move location at the moment. But we don't really want ghost cyclists. We want real cyclists. So my question basically is, if you build it, will they come, or will they not? The answer is possibly, but only if you make it simple for them. And this is really where the models and the behavioural change models can help, because they encourage us to think wider than actually just the delivery of the process to get them from A to B, in other words, a cycle path. A little bit about habit, and we all are habitualised in our travel habits to some degree. Travel habits are very ingrained. We tend to do them every day, and we'll tend to do things in the same way every day. So habits can be a real issue. Matt, can I just check? Can people hear that background noise or not?
Slightly, yeah, Ian, but it's,
Is it okay?
yeah, it's not distracting at all at the moment, so that's
Okay,
fine.
all right. It sounds really loud here, so apologies for that. Are they hard to break? Habits are incredibly hard to break. It's not a simple process. People become very ingrained, and people will only change their habit if there is something in it for them. So because we're expanding energy, and just generally speaking, as humans, we don't like to expand energy unless there is something in it for us. I quite often use the example of my dog, who is just lying down here. You know, he's a predator and he spends most of his day asleep, and he spends most of his day asleep because he's conserving energy. And humans are pretty much the same. We will only expand energy if there is something in it for us. So whilst engineering is part of the answer, it's not the only part, because all it does is give you the opportunity to do things differently. So it's not the whole picture. This is where a model such as COM-B is a really great tool to use to plan an intervention, as it just encourages much wider thinking. It encourages you to think about things in much more depth and to see more of the integration between the different elements. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time going through that model with you. So COM-B stands for capability, opportunity, motivation, and if you get all that right, you should in theory get the behavior you want. So, you know, hence the little dash and then behavior. So the COM-B model looks a little bit like that. I'm guessing you won't be able to see that on the screen. I'm going to zoom in on that in a moment or two, but I just wanted to show it in a wider context. The COM-B model is actually part of an approach to behavioural change called the behavioural change wheel. So I'll just put that up so you can see it. So at this grey end, at the grey circle around there, you have what's called the policy rim, and this rim is about guidelines. It's about environmental and social planning, and I really want to draw out that social planning bit. It's interesting that they've put both the environmental and the social planning bit in there, because really the two go together. The environment is changing the environment we live in, but it also requires us to help people to help society to change. So this social planning element of it. You've also got communication and marketing, changing legislation, service provision, regulation, and fiscal measures. In the red rim, you've got the levers that you would pull, the types of interventions you can have. And generally you will use a wide range of these different interventions, but we can persuade people, we can incentivize people, we can give them money, in other words, or some other form of incentives. We can coerce, we can train them, we can enable them, we can model the behavior we want to see, and then we've got environmental restructuring again there. And these are all pressing down into the center COM-B element, which right in the middle, that little black dot that I've put in there is the behavior you're looking at changing. So each one of these applies pressure lower down. I'm going to particularly concentrate in today's presentation about that central element, which is COM-B part of the model. So we're going to just run through the model a little bit. So similar examples around capability. You would want people to know why something is important, how to do what you want them to do, to have the physical and mental skills to actually do it, which is why if you look under capability, we've got physical and psychological capabilities, have the skills to overcome any barriers, etc. So those are the types of things we're talking about when we're thinking about giving people the capability to do what you want them to do. Opportunity, here we want them to have the time to do it, have the money to do it, you know, have the materials to do it, be able to access, in this case, the path or the area that's been allocated to cycling, know it's there, you know, even though you drive past it. You know, I was talking to two of my colleagues today, one of which lives in Doncaster. He will drive that road regularly. He said, "Oh, I've never noticed that path before. Yeah, it's bright red," you know. So those are the types of things that you would want to cover around opportunity. You know, and then finally, and most importantly in many ways, is motivation. People will only do something if there is something in it for them. And the more immediate the reward, the more likely they are to do it. People aren't very good at offsetting. So when we talk about things like you know, air quality will improve. Well, that sounds a bit woolly to me. You know, it doesn't. I know that air quality can improve, but actually a lot of people will think it's a long way off. You know, that you'd have to get a lot of cyclists to do that. It doesn't really matter if I'm not cycling. So the more immediate the reward, the better. So you have to convince them it's a good thing. Yeah, you have to help them to have a plan to do it. If you don't have a plan, then if you look under motivation, you'll notice it's automatic or reflective. Most things start as a reflective action. In other words, we have to plan to do it, and then over a period of time, it will become an automatic action. See and feel the benefits, and again, the more immediate those benefits are, the more likely we are to act on those benefits. Feel it's for them. So in other words, that it aligns to who they see themselves as. You know, so do they see themselves as a cyclist, or do they see themselves as a walker? I'm probably more likely to see myself as a walker than a cyclist, for example. See others doing it, and this is incredibly important. Have it pointed out to them how many people around them are actually using that path. You know, really encouraging them and seeing it as a social activity in some way. And most importantly, it has to be easy for them. If it's not easy for them, it requires more effort, and that requires more motivation. So it has to be easy for them. And there's many more other things. I've got two examples now for you. One is a more general one, and then I'm going to try and sort of pull that down into what are the types of things we should be thinking about when promoting cycling. So I'm going to move on to hand washing. The COM-B model was used for promoting hand washing in hospitals probably about 15 years ago, actually. You know, maybe not that long, maybe 10 years actually. And basically, it's a really nice, clear example of how you would use a COM-B model. So what capabilities were developed? Well, the first thing you had to do is to make sure that people could wash their hands properly. It's no good telling people to wash their hands if they're not doing it correctly. All you tend to do is move the bacteria around or the viruses around. So it was really important that people could wash their hands correctly. As we now all know, 20 seconds, 2 verses of happy birthday, whatever it is, you know, but getting between the fingers and all of that. So actually, when they implemented this model into hospitals about 10 years ago, one of the first things they did was they retrained all the staff in washing their hands, starting with consultants and working their way down. In fact, I once delivered a course, and somebody on the course, their previous role had been teaching people to wash their hands in hospitals, teaching the staff. Then we gave them greater opportunities to wash their hands. And in lots of ways, this was about dispensers. And if you've been into a hospital, you'll now see lots and lots of dispensers all over the place. But what you perhaps haven't noticed is about where they positioned the dispensers. And the dispensers were placed in a couple of key locations, usually when there was a transition, so going from one door into another, and particularly because that is a point where quite often, particularly visitors, have to stop and wait to be let into a ward, for example. And if one visitor washed their hands, what then tends to happen is anybody else waiting feels obliged to do the same. So here they were using social pressure as part of their motivation. They also put the dispensers in places where patients could observe the staff washing their hands. And that just encouraged the staff to wash their hands more frequently because they knew they were being very clearly observed. So there was a lot in there about the key location. So again, if you like, the engineering measure was more dispensers and where they were located. And then how were the staff and visitors motivated? Well, the positioning of the dispensers were a key part of that. That was a really important element of this approach, because what that did was it put on that social pressure. So it was using social pressure as a motivator. The world started publishing information about success, about their infection rates, okay? And a lot of the posters, a lot of the messaging was about making their patients feel as if they could help their loved ones in the hospital by washing their hands. So it was about appealing to them and making them feel important. So there was lots of things, very clever things done to motivate the visitors and staff coming into the hospital. And some of it was very subtle, but it was actually a very, very successful campaign. So that's just an example around hand washing, just to give you a feel for the types of things that you would think about under each one of those headings. Now let's just apply that to cycling. So we've got our model again. So capability, I'm not going to spend a great deal about capability because to be totally honest, I'm not an expert in cycling. So I've just used some general terms here, so read into this quite a bit. But the first thing, or one of the first things you would want them to do is, if you want to encourage new cyclists to take up cycling, you would really want them to understand the health benefits outweigh the perceived risks. Now, that's a really interesting thought process, because lots of people see cycling as being risky, right? Whether or not they're on road, whether or not they're off road, you know, they see it as being a risky activity because they will have to cross roads. They perhaps don't have the experience of doing it. But so that we have to convince the public that the health benefits outweigh that risky cycling. We have to, even though that, you know, that is true, to have the skills to cycle safely. So we need to give them the skills. So we've got the bikeability scheme. I've done some work, not with bikeability, but with the London Borough a few years ago. And one of the things that perhaps came out of that cycling bikeability on its own is not enough necessarily to encourage greater take-up of cycling. There's lots of other barriers that stop it. So it's not just about skills, but it's a very important element of it. Then we've got to give them the skills to plan a safe route. That route I showed you from Doncaster, I was thinking about it the other day when I was prepping this presentation, and I was thinking, well, a lot of the college staff come into Doncaster by train, and I was thinking, I wonder if they know how to get from the train station using cycle paths only pretty much to the college, because that would be quite a number of people using that route. And I was thinking about how I would do it, and actually I really struggled. So, you know, have I got an app that would help me to plan that route, the best route from one point to another? So, and would I have the skills to use that? So those are all the types of things you would think about capability. I'm not going to spend ages on that bit, because a lot of them are perhaps a bit self-evident. Again, I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on the opportunity bit, but we would want to be able to access safe, rapid and wide cycling routes. Different cyclists travel at different speeds, so it's got to be wide enough to allow them to overtake or to meet cyclists coming the other way. They would need access to a cycle and related equipment. It's great having a cycle path there, but if they don't have a cycle, they're unlikely to use it. Be able to overtake slow moving cyclists, I've touched on that, and walkers safely. That's my pet bugbear, I have to say, as you probably heard at the beginning of the presentation. And to have access to route planning tools to enable them to do that. So a bit of overlap from the previous one. So they would need the skills to use those route planning apps, but they would need to have it pointed out where they could access those route planning apps. To be able to securely park a cycle at home and at work. In a lot of city areas where you've perhaps got flats, then parking your bike at home probably causes you as much of a problem, if not more of a problem, than parking at work. So you've got both sides of that equation to consider. And again, we'd want them to see other cyclists to and from. This gives them the opportunity of feeling, well, if they can do it, I can do it too. So there's quite a lot of social interaction under the opportunity element. And then be able to shower and change at work. You know, if it's a red hot day like today, you know, cycling, you know, even if you're taking it steady, you're going to get a bit of a lather on. So you're going to not want to sit around in, you know, dirty clothing all day. So that's another element. Okay. And one of the opportunities would be to promote cycle parking over car parking. So it feels as if, you know, it gives you the opportunity of always being able to come in and being able to park your bike, perhaps at the railway station, but also at the college, to use my example that I'm going to use throughout of this. So those are the types of things. So a lot of that is engineering. That's absolutely great. But even giving them the opportunity and the capability, the key bit in this model is what's going to motivate them to do it. You're asking them to change habits, and habits are incredibly difficult to change. They require energy to change, and as I've already said, people will only expand that energy if there is something in it for them. So To see cycling as being a positive way of helping the community. You know, I think this is something we could really sell it on. We could really highlight that, how you, by being a cyclist, you're helping air quality, you know, you're helping the community, you're perhaps reducing the COVID transmission, which is when I actually wrote this, as I'll tell you about in a moment. That was one of the key things I was thinking about. To feel part of an action group, to feel part of a group that is taking action, either to improve the environment or just to help the communities just generally. To see and feel the health benefits, really pointing out what those health benefits are and getting them to actually self-monitor themselves. Because if you don't see the health benefit, the health benefits are incremental. They come up on you over a period of time. And if you're not monitoring them, you don't realize that you're getting a benefit. So can we give them tools that would help them to monitor themselves to see that their health is improving as they're cycling more? Again, to see others cycling, to be given information about how many people are cycling in their organization, that actually the organization is very pro-cycling and encouraging to cycling. Focusing perhaps on senior staff. If you've got locations, I've used the college here, but if you've got locations, key locations around a cycle path, really we should be communicating very actively with those organizations and getting their senior staff cycling, because the more they do it, the more likely that is to cascade down. Can we give them some form of financial reward? And if we can't, if there is a financial reward, like less mileage on your car, less fuel, are we pointing out those benefits? Are we giving them really clear ways of working out and seeing in some very clear way how that reward is mounting up? How are we helping cyclists to plan to cycle? I'll take you back to the motivation. If you notice, you've got automatic and reflective. Reflective means having a plan to change your behavior. If people do not have clear plans to change their behavior on an individual level, it will never become the automatic option. And actually plans will only last so long before we drop back. We've all made, commitments to do things at New Year's, and we do them for about a month and then drop back to what we normally do. So having a clear plan, encouraging them to stick to that plan for long enough to actually implement it, so that it becomes the automated option. To recognize the benefits of a consistent travel time. This is one of the key things that cycling gives you. If I wanted to travel to Julie's college, realistically, I have to allow 15 minutes. Although if I was cycling, I could probably do it in 10, you know, because I wouldn't have to allow for traffic conditions. So are we encourage people to recognize that benefit of consistent travel time? It always feels faster somehow in a car, but actually in reality, particularly for short journeys, then cycling probably is faster because you don't have to allow that extra time just in case you get stuck in traffic.
Ian, I'm conscious of the time, Ian. So are you able to?
I'm just on my last slide. Yeah.
That's all right. Thank you.
Yeah, these benefits are not self-evident. All right, these have to be pointed out. Okay, and we really need to try and point those benefits out. So I'll just do my last slide. To be successful, then we need to think widely. We need to use the COM-B model and not just put engineering in the place. At the moment, the pot's about 2 billion, I believe. You know, and we don't want to end up with that at the end of this process. You know, a lovely piece of engineering, but no cyclists. Okay. I'd just like to thank Derbyshire, because some of the work that I've shown I did for Derbyshire right at the beginning of the COVID crisis. Any questions? There you go.
Thank you for your time. And Nicola and Ian, thank you for your contributions, because I think I completely, everything that you're saying sort of resonates in everything that we've done as well. So I won't make any excuses around how long it took or how quickly we had to make a decision on some of the stuff that we needed to do, and how hard we've tried to look at the barriers and introduce elements to break those barriers down, so that we end up with cyclists on the road rather than not, as the case may be. So school streets, to be or not to be, I suppose, at the end of the day, I just want to make it really clear that you know, for our funding, 495,000 was our pot. 465,000 went to engineering, and I had to fight in the ring for £30,000. And I thought I'd won the gold pot, because within road safety and my budgets, 30,000 seemed to be a huge amount of money. But down to the sort of timing and the constraints we had to identify schools that we could potentially run a school streets programme with, was such a short time. We only managed to engage with one school that seemed to be working over the summer holidays, and management said you can only do one. And actually, in hindsight, doing one means that I've been able to focus more on the other elements around cycling rather than just closing the road, which is ultimately what the school streets is all about. But not reinvented the wheel, have completely taken on board the research and the evidence that were provided by the the Edinburgh report, the best practices from Hackney and Birmingham, and a whole host of other people. So, the things that we've introduced will completely be recognised. Okay, so there's nothing new or different in relation to the actual school streets part of it. Like everybody, part of the criteria for the Emergency Active Travel Fund specifically said you had to have consultation. And again, we're talking about tranche 2, so I was very mindful. It was important to get the focus and the willingness of the local residents that closing the road wasn't going to make them walk, cycle or scoot more to school. Ian, like you said, bikeability was just one element. And I've worked for the council for 15 years. We've done bikeability for 10, and we've never increased our cycle to school from our hands up services from the day I started to the day we are now, which is, seen as the amount of effort that we put into cycle training. Why aren't we encouraging more young people to cycle? Again, best practice through Hackney, making sure that you get all your partners on board. So internally and externally, the stakeholders involved are, over 50 that I'm sort of managing and discussing and talking to. So no mean feat. And obviously for me, the data. So Ian, please listen carefully, because if I've missed anything, this is my opportunity to make sure that you can, after all the training, that I've done absolutely everything that I can. And also not only Ian's training, but Tana Fostick and Nicola Vass, I am really interested on not just providing opportunities for cycling, but changing that behaviour and how we can address some of those elements or those fears that the sort of pandemic has provided us with an opportunity, because there is certainly a willingness for families to do more cycling. But as we come out of pandemic, where there was many drivers were sympathetic, are becoming less sympathetic when it's caused them to give up their space, etc. So again, if you look at the 465,000 that was invested locally for us, my frustration is that majority of it is based around planning utility cycling, so go cycling to work, yet evidentially the evidence and the responses from local residents is most of their cycling currently is at a leisure stage. And my frustration is that we're not concentrating on the leisure to provide them with the skills and the confidence to then give them the opportunity to cycle for utility. And that's just a personal feeling. Consultation wise, this was a new one for West Berkshire Council. We'd pretty much done all of our consultations via a Survey Monkey, and again take no credibility around using commonplace, because there are hundreds of commonplaces used by hundreds of local authorities. The interesting about this consultation is it does cover the whole of the experimental traffic order. So it runs in a couple of stages. So the initial consultation is very much about what would you like us to do, with some guidance, as we are the credible source. We are the experts in making sure that the residents understand we can do some things, but we can't do others, and the reasons behind it. But what would you really like? So certainly for school streets, I could ask, where would you like the road closures to be? What times would you like that to happen? Do you need this or do you need that? And it also expanded into, do you really feel active travel is important? And what is it that's preventing you from doing it? And from all of that information, we built in the scheme that will be going in September of this year. The other side of it is once the scheme goes in, this platform remains open. So once the scheme is in, they'll still be able to feed back. So now we're looking at the practicalities around the scheme. So we've done the theory, we've got their ideas, it goes in as a practical measure, and it remains untouched for 6 to 9 months whilst the general public feedback. And we're encouraging not only local residents that might be affected, but also those passing through the area that maybe come to work that way or drop off children, because parents have got the choice now to where they school their children, and they can take certain routes. Really importantly, this platform also allows us to sort out the noise from whether it's really affecting them, because it postcode data plots who it is that is responding to the feedback and the reasons why. After 6 to 9 months of the scheme going in, under the monitoring and the criteria set by the DFT, we will need to respond to that feedback and either make alterations or change, do another feedback consultation, and at the end of the 18 months, take it out or it remains if it's been changed. So a really interactive, visible platform that allows us not only to share videos, allows us to overlay maps and plans of roads and what things might look like. They can share it between themselves, so we can answer questions from one person that might have answered the same, 20 people might be asking the same question, and we'd answer it with one and they'd be able to see it, thumbs up, thumbs down, those types of things. So we found it really, really useful. So really looking forward to, the implementation in the phase 2 to seeing how it actually works on the ground. So, not only collecting and monitoring from the start to finish, but the in-between bit, which I think is really important, just to make sure what we're putting in is the right thing to do. We have taken on the model similar to Birmingham. So again, nothing new. We are only doing one as a pilot for actual school streets, but we recognise that within West Berkshire, we're a semi-rural area, so we've got schools right in the outback of West Ilsley and those areas, and we do have some, very rural and some urban areas as well. So not a car-free school streets isn't going to fit everybody. So we've built in these 4 car-free, slow down, keep clear and switch off. So we've got capacity to bespoke school streets to the specific schools and their areas. But apart from school streets being the pilot, we've not tested any of the others. So again, something to come. So this is school streets car free then. So you won't be surprised that it does have some signs and it stops vehicles entering an area around the school. Specific times been identified through the consultation. Interestingly, or maybe slightly different, the residents and those that fed back have chosen the times. They have chosen where these signs are positioned, so they're not right at the school entrance, they're slightly further. So the concerns around parking displacement was listened to. We will be monitoring the other areas to make sure that it's not pushed even further out. They did want a permit. These signs they're flat signs, so they can be during school holidays, they will be reversed, if you like, so it will be plain, so it won't exist, so it's only term time only. So again, we're putting in provision for the caretaker to open and close them at the start and the end of the term. We will not be having any physical road closure at these points. This is going to be completely run off of goodwill. We'll see how it goes. But obviously in the first week, high presence of the police, because that's part of our partnership working, and PCSOs regularly, although they can't stop moving traffic offences, being visible hopefully will help deter. But this is about hearts and minds. This is about the consultation asked local residents, what did they want? We've responded in that we can provide these, but it comes with these elements as such. And we are really focusing on what they can get from it, as Ian said, rather than what's being removed. So we never talk about the removal of access to the vehicles. We talk about what they will get out of it. So health and well-being, reduction of air pollution. We've been doing that since January because, again, ideal opportunity where no cars are outside schools or very little. And we'll be using that data to feed and share throughout the consultation because the platform allows us to do updates and provide news. What will be different or may be different to many other school streets is all of the other things that we're introducing. So we've got the standard bikeability, we've got, like it is suggested around the Edinburgh report, parking displacement, making sure park and stride schemes are in place, walking buses are in place. We have our own safety outside school signs that have always been there. We're introducing Dr. Bike. We've got initiatives around motivation for the school children and the parents. We've provided the school with cycle storage. We're introducing a community cycle club in the area. We've engaged with our recycling centres to get bikes that have been taken to the recycling centres. They're going to give them to us back, and we're going to pimp them up and hand them back to the community. They'll have to, do that work for themselves. Something new, and I love these, and these are our incentives for young people. So at Calcutt School, which this is going to be the pilot at, once they've done their bikeability level 1-2 combined, they will also be doing level 3, which we've not really focused on in the past. And once they've done that, as part of their ownership and responsibility, we're looking at school pledges that they will then need to display their registration plate for their school. And we're hoping at primary school, this will give them a little bit more responsibility, knowing that somebody might be able to identify them, because again, as a local authority, quite often, this child going to this school has been doing silly things here, but we've got no idea unless somebody spotted the uniform, and the uniforms can be very, very similar. So we're trying to raise the profile of the cyclists and how it's important for them to also take ownership and responsibility around their cycling. And of course, we're providing cycle training. So, if we've given them all cycle training up to level 3, we want them to give something back. So all of those things and more, they'll be monitoring themselves. They will be, like I say, they're doing air quality outside their schools. They're doing health and fitness stuff within the schools, all sort of coordinated alongside. It will also include the school travel plans updates and modal shift as well, which again, we've not been very good at within our local authority. There is a control as well, and I've not come across this before. So Calcutt is the school that we're piloting our school streets on, and like I say, it's not just about the 500 metres of closed road. It's all of the other things that we are providing as a local authority. And I think being able to concentrate on one school and have 30,000 is probably, management saying you can only do one was actually quite a good idea, because I've used that money to actually do quite a lot of stuff at one school. But what's important to me, and again, I am really mindful that I'm not going to have £30,000 to do other, the 87 other schools that I have in the district. So I'm never going to get £30,000 again. So I need to make sure what we're introducing actually is effective. Is school streets closing the road provided the motivation and the opportunity for more walking, cycling and scooting to school, or actually have I provided a much better resource around all of the other provisions to help and support walking and cycling, more walking groups, engagement with local cycle clubs, new routing, new planning, new cycles, walk to school. So exactly the same interventions that are going in at Calcutta are being replicated at a school nearby called Westwood Farm. So they are having exactly the same treatment. They've been given £10,000 to upgrade and do cycle security and covers, increase their welly racks, do scooter stuff. They'll have all the same bikeability training opportunities. They'll have access. They're close enough to share the community cycle provision that we're going to be putting in place, and the doctor bikes and the pimping the bike work. So come September, when this all gets going, what we'll actually be doing is monitoring the effectiveness of the school streets of a road closure against exactly the same, but without the road closure at all. And hopefully I will then be able to engage back with our members and quantify whether it's actually all of the hassle and all of the stuff that we needed to close a road, or actually do I need to invest more on some of the other stuff that helps engage with the local residents and give them the opportunity to do more walk or cycling or scooting. And that's it from me.